Komitas. In a Turkish city called Kütahya, on September 26, 1869, a child was brought to our world. From this moment onwards, he was destined to become one of the greatest people in the history of Armenian culture. Born into the family of Gevorg and Taguhi Sohomonyan, was a little boy, Sohomon. Despite the fact that both of his parents were simple craftsmen, both of them had a unique musical talent. This talent was later passed down to their son. This is how the story of the great Armenian composer Komitas began. The childhood of Komitas was filled with deprivation and joylessness. He lost his mother before he was even a year old. His father was unable to take care of the baby due to his work, and so the responsibility was taken by his grandmother. At 7 years old, Komitas was accepted into his local elementary school, after completion of which his father sent him to Bursa, continuing his education. The latter did not work out for him, and after 4 months he returned home completely an orphan. His father died, yet Sohomon was only 11 years old. He was a frail, weak and pale boy, always thoughtful and kind. He didn't dress well. This is the way that Komitas was remembered by one of his classmates. He sang wonderfully. It wasn't by accident that in Kütahya he was called the Little Wandering Singer. In 1881, an event occurred that changed Sohomon's life forever. The priest of Kütahya, Gevorg Dertsakyan, had to leave for Echmiadzin, and at the request of Catholicos, he had to bring with him one orphan boy to study at the Echmiadzin Theological Seminary. Of the 20 orphans, 12-year-old Sohomon was chosen. On October 1st, the boy was presented to the Catholicos. The latter began to speak Armenian, and Sohomon did not understand anything, since at that time in Kütahya Armenians were forbidden to communicate in their native tongue. He spoke Turkish and responded to the greetings of Catholicos Gevorg IV. "I don't speak Armenian. If you want, I can sing." Then the Catholicos said that there was nothing to talk about with the boy, since he did not know Armenian. Sohomon replied that he had come to study and sing. When he began to sing Luis Zavart, Sohomon noticed how the Catholicos was crying. And with his beautiful soprano, he sang an Armenian sharakan, spiritual anthem. Thanks to his exceptional abilities, Sohomon became fluent in the Armenian language in a short time. In 1893, after he graduated seminary, he accepted the title of a pope and a new name of Catholicos Komitas, an outstanding poet of the 7th century, the author of multiple Armenian chants. In the seminary, Komitas was appointed as a music teacher. While working as a teacher, Komitas creates his choir, orchestra of national instruments, processes folk songs, and writes his first researches about Armenian church music. In 1895, Komitas accepted the title of Archimandrite, and in autumn of the same year, he moved to Tiflis to study in a music school. However, after meeting a composer, Markar Ekmalyan, that graduated the Conservatory of St. Petersburg, Komitas decided he wants to take harmony courses from Markar. These classes became a kind of forerunner and a solid basis for mastering the European technique of composition. Later events in the life of Komitas happened in the musical center of Europe, Berlin, where he was studying with the protection of Catholicos, being financed by a huge Armenian oil tycoon, Alexander Mantasyan. Komitas got into a private conservatory of the professor Richard Schmidt. While studying with him, Komitas also attends the Imperial University of Berlin on philosophy, aesthetics, world and music history classes. During the years of study, he also had a chance to learn more about the European music and further enrich his stock of knowledge by engaging in musical and critical activities. Upon invitation of the International Musical Society, he gave lectures on Armenian church and holy music in comparison with Turkish, Arabic and Kurdish music. In September of 1899, Komitas returned to Echmiadzin and immediately turned around his musical activity. In a short time, he changed the system of music education in seminaries from its roots, forming a small orchestra and perfecting the performing level of the choir. He went across different regions of Armenia, recording thousands of Armenian, Kurdish, Persian, and Turkish songs, then later creating their reformed versions. Komitas was also greatly engaging in researching work. He studied Armenian folk and spiritual melodies, working on deciphering Armenian chazes and vocal theory. Komitas performed in many countries as a performer and as a propagandist of Armenian music. The composer began to think about large monumental musical forms. He created the musical epic Sasna Tserer and further continued work on the Anush opera, which he began in 1904. Komitas focused his time on topics regarding the art of folk music, uncovering the content of folk songs. The greatest achievement of the composer was realized from the years of 1904 to 1914. In these years he traveled through Armenian villages in modern Armenia and Turkey, observing and listening to the local villagers. He recorded over 4,000 Christian songs, majority of which was lost during the Armenian genocide. After the murders of Armenians, only 1,500 works remain which we have now. Komitas was most interested by the development of folk songs. He believed that the soul of a people is possible to be seen and understood only after you see the people dance. It was his understanding that rhythm and movement give an idea of what the people have gone through, and the song showed the intonations of the language. According to Komitas, all these factors when brought together show the true nature of the people. The direction of Komitas to musical pedagogy was not liked by the Catholicos of all Armenians, who saw this as a composer using church music for the wrong purposes. This led to the conflict between Komitas and the church. Gradually, the indifference of the new leaders, the negative attitude of the backward lawyer, and the church leaders, gossip and slander increased so much that they poisoned the life of the composer, a man who remained in the minds of his contemporaries as an absolute secular person. The conflict deepened so much that Komitas sent a letter to the Catholicos, begging him to be released and allowed to live and create in peace. This petition remained unanswered, and the persecution of Komitas became even more obvious. As a result of Komitas not wanting to sacrifice his work, he renounced the title of ordained bishop. In 1910, Komitas left Eshmiadzin and headed for Constantinople. He thought that there he would find an environment that would understand, protect and encourage his activities, and then he would be able to turn his dreams into reality. Komitas wanted to create a national conservatory, with which he connected the further musical fate of his people. But the composer fails to fulfill his intentions, however, like many others. His aspired ideas were met only with the cold indifference of the local authorities. In Constantinople, Komitas organized a mixed choir of 300 people, calling it Gusan. The latter was very popular in his concert program. The main place belonged to the Armenian folk songs. Komitas often spent his time traveling with reports and lectures, performing in his concerts as a soloist and conductor. The composer had an excellent command of the flute and piano. He was gifted with great power to influence his listeners. Such famous musicians as Vincent Dandy, Gabriel Fauré, and Camille Saint-Saëns were subdued by the art of Komitas. In 1906, after one of the concerts, the outstanding French composer Claude Debussy excitedly exclaimed, "Brilliant, Father Komitas, I bow to your musical genius." In Constantinople, Komitas did not find disinterested like-minded people who would help to realize his plans. Moreover, if in Eshmiadzin he was with his native people, was close to their way of life and art, then in Constantinople, Komitas was deprived of this as well. However, he continued his work and paid special attention to the creation of spiritual works. Following this path, Komitas created one of his masterpieces, Batarak, Liturgy, written for the male choir. An area which was no less important for Komitas was musicology. In Paris, at the conference of the International Music Society, the composer reads two reports, Armenian folk music and an old and new notation of Armenian sacred music, which aroused great interest amongst the conference participants. Komitas was immediately offered to read another additional report on the topic on the time, place, situation and rhythm of Armenian music. During the First World War, the government of the Young Turks began to implement its monstrous program to the cruel and inhuman destruction of the Armenian people. In April 1915, along with a number of Armenian representatives of the Armenian intelligence, Komitas was also arrested. After the arrest accompanied by violence, he was exiled deep into Anatolia, where he witnessed the brutal destruction of the bright minds of the nation. Despite the fact that thanks to influential personalities, Komitas was able to return to Constantinople, the nightmare he experienced left a deep and indelible imprint on his soul. Komitas secluded himself from the outside world, took refuge in his gloomy and heavy thoughts, broken and saddened. In 1916, Komitas' health deteriorated, and he was placed in a psychiatric clinic. However, there was no hope for the Vardapet's recovery. Before the fatal disease of Komitas, medicine has seemed to be powerless. The last 20 years of his life, the genius of Armenian music spent in the suburbs of Paris, in the hospital Villejuif. On October 22, 1935, the life of the great Komitas had concluded. In the springs of 1936, his ashes were transferred to Armenia and interred in Yerevan. Today, the genius of Armenian music rests in the pantheon of cultural figures, which is located at the park named after him. No less tragic was the fate of the creative legacy of Komitas. Ever since most of his manuscripts have been either destroyed or lost all over the world. A significant contribution to the preservation of the musical heritage of Komitas was made by the Armenian composer Mushekh Aghayan. Thanks to his efforts and perseverance, more than 100 works of Komitas were deciphered. The Armenian people in the Song of Komitas found and recognized their soul, their spiritual self. Komitas Vardapet is a beginning that has no end. He must live by the Armenian people, and the people must live by him, now and forever.